Mason's boots clanged against the metal grating as he strode down the corridor of the starship Elysium. His tool belt jangled with each step, the sound echoing in the empty hallway. He pulled up the schematics on his wrist-mounted holopad, double-checking the route to the cargo bay. "All right, one last systems check and we're good to go," he muttered to himself. As the ship's lead engineer, it was his job to ensure everything was in perfect working order before launch. The cargo bay doors hissed open as Mason approached. He stepped inside, surveying the cavernous space packed with crates and containers. This ship would be carrying precious cargo indeed, hundreds of elite female colonists bound for paradise, a newly discovered world said to be humanity's best hope for a fresh start. Mason shook his head slightly. The thought of all those beautiful women just a few decks away. He pushed the distracting thoughts aside. He was here to do a job, nothing more. He made his way deeper into the cargo hold, running diagnostics on the life support and gravity systems. Everything checked out normal so far. As he neared the far wall, a flashing red light caught his eye. "Hello, what's this?" Mason frowned, crouching down to examine a malfunctioning status panel. He pried off the cover and peered inside at the tangle of wires and circuits. "Looks like a faulty connection. Easy enough fix." He was so absorbed in the repair that he didn't notice the cargo bay doors sliding shut behind him. It wasn't until he heard the telltale hum of the engines powering up that his head snapped up in alarm. "No! No! No!" Mason sprinted for the doors, but it was too late. They were sealed tight, the launch sequence already initiated. He pounded his fists against the unyielding metal. "Hey, anyone out there? The engineer's still in here." But his cries went unheard over the roar of the engines. Mason stumbled as the ship lurched, breaking free of the space station's artificial gravity. A sickening sensation of weightlessness overcame him as the Elysium began its journey to the stars, with him as an accidental stowaway. "Shit," Mason cursed, pushing off from the wall to float towards the center of the cargo bay. He tried to think through his options, but panic threatened to overwhelm him. He was trapped in here, and the ship was on an automated course. There would be no one to hear him or let him out until they reached their destination. Months from now. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to calm down. "Okay, Mason. You're an engineer. Problem solve. What do you need to survive?" Air wouldn't be an issue. The cargo bay's life support was tied into the main ship systems, but food and water. His eyes fell on the rows of crates and containers surrounding him. Many of them likely held supplies for the new colony. It went against protocol, but he had no choice. He was going to have to break into the cargo to survive. Using his multi-tool, Mason managed to pry open one of the smaller crates. Inside, he found packets of nutrient bars and containers of purified water. He let out a sigh of relief. At least he wouldn't starve or die of thirst. But as the reality of his situation sank in, a wave of despair washed over him. He was going to be stuck in this metal box for months, alone with nothing to do but wait. "Some engineer you are," he berated himself. "Didn't even notice the damn doors closing. Real smooth, Mason." The days stretched into an endless blur. Mason rationed his food and water carefully, unsure of exactly how long the journey would take. To pass the time, he explored every inch of the cargo bay, familiarizing himself with the ship's systems. He even managed to jury-rig a makeshift bunk using packing materials. But the solitude began to wear on him. Mason found himself talking out loud just to hear a human voice. "Day 10 of my imprisonment," he announced dramatically to his imaginary audience. "The loneliness is starting to affect my sanity. I've named that rusty bolt in the corner Fred. He's not much for conversation, but beggars can't be choosers." He was in the middle of recounting the tale of his daring escape from the cargo bay, purely fictional of course, when a violent shudder ran through the ship. Mason was thrown against the wall as alarms began blaring. What the hell? He pushed himself upright, stumbling as the floor pitched beneath him. The ship was being tossed about like a toy boat in a storm. But they were in deep space. What could possibly be causing such turbulence? A deafening screech of tearing metal filled the air. Mason's eyes widened in horror as he saw the hull beginning to buckle. Oh shit! His world exploded into chaos. The cargo bay depressurized in an instant, loose objects flying everywhere in the vacuum. The vacuum of space pulled at him. Just as he lost his grip, a piece of debris struck his head. Darkness engulfed him. Mason awoke to a cacophony of alien bird calls. His eyes fluttered open, revealing a canopy of strange purple-leaf trees. Thick, ropey vines cradled his battered body, having broken his fall. Groaning, he disentangled himself and dropped to the forest floor. The wreckage of the Elysium lay scattered around him, smoke still rising from some larger pieces. "Hello?" he called out. "Is anyone there?" A high-pitched scream answered him. Mason rushed toward the sound, pushing through dense foliage until he stumbled into a clearing filled with disoriented women. The scene before him was chaos. Some of the colonists were weeping openly, while others argued in shrill voices. A few seemed frozen in shock, staring blankly at the alien landscape. "Ladies, please calm down," Mason tried, but his voice was lost in the commotion. A statuesque redhead rounded on him, eyes flashing. "Calm down? We're stranded on some godforsaken planet. Do you have any idea who I am? I demand you get us out of here immediately." "I'm sorry, but—" Mason began, only to be cut off by another woman's hysterical sobs. "My jewelry, my clothes, everything's gone," she wailed, clutching at her now tattered designer spacesuit. Mason felt overwhelmed by the rising panic until a soft touch on his arm made him turn. He found himself looking into the deep black eyes of a blue-skinned woman. Despite the situation, her gaze held a gentle calmness that immediately put him at ease. "Perhaps we should all take a deep breath," she suggested, her melodious voice somehow cutting through the noise. "I'm Asiya, and you are?" "Mason," he replied, grateful for her composure. "I'm the ship's engineer, or I was anyway." Asiya nodded, offering a small smile. "Well, Mason, it seems we're in quite the predicament, but panicking won't help. What do you suggest we do first?" Her question seemed to snap the others out of their hysteria. They turned to Mason expectantly, fear and uncertainty clear in their eyes. "Right," Mason said, straightening his shoulders. "First, we need to assess any injuries. Then we'll look for shelter and clean water. Once we're secure, we can salvage what we can from the wreckage." A tall woman with silvery hair stepped forward. "I'm Eve, a xenobiologist. I can help identify safe water sources and potentially edible plants." "Good," Mason nodded. "Anyone else with useful skills?" "I was Martian Special Forces," a green-scaled woman called out. "Name's Pelia. I can handle security and hunting if needed." As the group began to organize, Mason noticed a shimmering figure hovering at the edge of the clearing. Her form seemed to shift and blur, never quite settling on a single appearance. "And you are?" he asked. "Astrid," she replied, her voice echoing strangely. "I'm complicated, but I can sense things others can't. This planet, it's alive in ways you might not understand." A shiver ran down Mason's spine at her words. He looked up at the lavender sky, where 3 moons hung ominously. On the horizon, twin suns began to set, casting long shadows through the alien forest. "All right, everyone, he called out, trying to project confidence he didn't entirely feel. Let's get to work. We've got a long night ahead of us. As the group dispersed to their tasks, Asiya remained by Mason's side. You're doing well, she said softly. They needed someone to lead, even if they don't realize it yet. Mason sighed, running a hand through his hair. I just hope I'm up to the task. This isn't exactly what I signed up for. Asiya's hand found his, giving it a reassuring squeeze. None of us did, but we're alive, and we're together. That's a start. As darkness fell, bringing with it strange, glowing creatures and eerie sounds from the depths of the forest, Mason couldn't shake the feeling that their troubles were only beginning. But with Asiya's warmth beside him and the determined faces of their makeshift community around him, he allowed himself a glimmer of hope. Whatever this alien world had in store for them, they would face it together. Later that night, Mason lay on his makeshift bed of scavenged materials, staring up at the unfamiliar sky. The dual moons cast an ethereal light over the clearing, and the forest buzzed with alien life. Sleep eluded him as his mind raced with thoughts of their situation and the overwhelming responsibility on his shoulders. A soft rustling nearby caught his attention. He sat up, peering into the dim light. Asiya approached, her graceful form barely making a sound as she moved. "Mason," she whispered, her voice like a soothing melody in the night. "I couldn't sleep. May I join you?" "Of course," he replied, scooting over to make space beside him. "What's on your mind?" She settled down next to him, their shoulders brushing. "Everything," she admitted softly. "The crash, this planet, our future. It's all so uncertain." He nodded, understanding her fears all too well. "I know, but we have to take it one step at a time. We'll figure it out together." Asiya turned to face him, her black eyes reflecting the moonlight. "You're strong, Mason. The others look to you for guidance. And I find myself drawn to you in ways I can't quite explain." Her words sent a thrill through him. He had felt a connection to her from the moment they met, an inexplicable bond forged in the midst of chaos. "Asiya, Before he could finish, she leaned in, her lips brushing against his in a tentative kiss. It was soft and sweet, a gentle exploration that quickly deepened as they gave in to the emotions that had been simmering between them. Mason's hand found the small of her back, pulling her closer as their kiss intensified. Asiya's fingers tangled in his hair, and she sighed softly against his mouth. The warmth of her body against his was a comfort he hadn't realized he needed so desperately. She pulled back slightly, her breath coming in soft pants. "Mason, I need you," she whispered, her voice trembling with vulnerability. "Here, now." He gazed into her eyes, seeing the same longing mirrored in their depths. "I need you too, Asiya." Their movements were slow, almost reverent as they shed the barriers between them. Asiya's touch was gentle, her fingertips tracing the contours of his body with a tenderness that made his heart ache. He responded in kind, exploring the softness of her skin, the way her body responded to his touch. The night was filled with the sounds of the alien forest, but to Mason and Asiya, it felt like they were the only two beings in existence. Their connection, born out of shared adversity, grew stronger with each passing moment. As they came together, their bodies moving in perfect harmony, a sense of peace washed over Mason. For the first time since the crash, he felt a flicker of hope, a belief that they could survive this together. Asiya's quiet moans and whispered words of encouragement spurred him on, and he was acutely aware of the women around them, their presence a reminder of the delicate balance of their new reality. He wondered if they could hear, if they understood the intensity of the moment. In the throes of their passion, Asia's voice cut through the night, soft but clear. "You're my engineer," she murmured, her words a declaration of their bond. Mason's heart swelled at her words. "And you're my anchor," he replied, his voice filled with emotion. Their movements quickened, the world around them fading into the background. The culmination of their connection was intense and overwhelming, leaving them both breathless and spent. As they lay entwined, their breaths slowly returning to normal, Mason felt a profound sense of contentment. He glanced at Asia, her face serene and radiant in the moonlight. "Thank you," she whispered, her fingers lightly tracing circles on his chest. "For everything." He kissed her forehead, feeling a deep sense of gratitude for this moment of solace amidst the chaos. "No, thank you, Asia, for giving me hope." As they drifted off to sleep, the forest around them continued its symphony of sounds. The women nearby, who had heard their intimate encounter, found themselves reflecting on their own desires and fears. Some felt a pang of envy, others a sense of solidarity. In the quiet of the night, the makeshift community found a new strength, a belief that together they could face whatever challenges lay ahead. And at the heart of it all, Mason and Asia's bond became a beacon of hope, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there is light to be found. The alien forest buzzed with activity as Mason led the group through the dense undergrowth. Sweat beaded on his brow, the humid air clinging to his skin like a second suit. Behind him, the colonists stumbled along, their designer spacesuits ill-suited for the rugged terrain. "Watch your step," Mason called back, holding a branch aside for Asia. The blue-skinned woman smiled gratefully, her hand lingering on his arm as she passed. "Thank you, Mason," she murmured. "You're so considerate." A snort from behind made Mason turn. Pelia, the Martian ex-soldier, rolled her eyes. "Yes, what a gentleman," she drawled. "Now, can we focus on finding water before we all die of thirst?" Mason nodded, trying to ignore the tension between the women. "Right. Eve, any luck identifying potential water sources?" The silvery-haired xenobiologist consulted her makeshift tricorder, cobbled together from salvaged ship parts. "I'm detecting higher moisture levels to the northwest. Could be a stream or spring." "Excellent," Mason said. "Lead the way." As they trekked on, Astrid drifted to Mason's side. Her form shimmered like a mirage, never quite solid. "The forest speaks," she whispered. "It knows we're here." Mason suppressed a shiver. "That's comforting, I think. Any chance it could speak up about where to find food?" Astrid's laugh was like wind chimes. "Perhaps, but be careful what you wish for. Some things here hunger as well." Before Mason could ask what she meant, a cry rang out from the front of the group. He rushed forward to find Eve kneeling by a small, burbling spring. "Water!" she exclaimed, dipping her hands in the clear liquid. "Wait!" Mason shouted, but it was too late. Eve had already taken a sip. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Eve's eyes rolled back and she collapsed. Chaos erupted. Women screamed and backed away from the spring. Mason knelt by Eve, checking her pulse. It was erratic, but present. "It's poison!" someone yelled. "We're all going to die here." Mason stood, raising his hands. "Everyone, calm down. She's alive. We just need to—" A rustling in the nearby bushes cut him off. Something was coming. Pelia stepped forward, brandishing a makeshift spear. "Get behind me," she growled. The bushes parted, revealing a small, furry creature that looked like a cross between a rabbit and a lemur. It blinked at them with large, liquid eyes before hopping to the spring and taking a long drink. "Well?" Mason said after a moment. I guess it's safe after all. Eve groaned, sitting up groggily. What happened? You fainted, Asiya explained, helping her to her feet. The water seems to have a strong effect on our systems. Mason nodded. We'll need to be careful. Small sips at first until our bodies adjust. As the group cautiously refreshed themselves, Mason surveyed their surroundings. The spring flowed from a rocky outcropping, providing natural shelter. Thick-leaved trees offered coverage from the elements. This could work, he mused aloud. We could set up camp here, at least temporarily. Pelia nodded approvingly. Defensible position, water source nearby. Not bad, engineer. Over the next few days, the group worked to establish a base camp. Mason taught them how to construct simple shelters using fallen branches and broad leaves. Pelia organized hunting parties, bringing back strange but edible creatures. Eve cataloged the local flora, identifying which plants were safe to eat. Throughout it all, Mason couldn't help but notice the way the women vied for his attention. Asiya was always nearby, offering sweet words of encouragement and gentle touches. Pelia challenged him to improvise training sessions, her competitive spirit igniting something primal in him. Eve sought his input on her research, her brilliant mind a constant source of fascination. And Astrid, well, she simply watched, her enigmatic presence both alluring and unsettling. One evening, as they sat around the campfire, Pelia regaled the group with tales of her military exploits. And that's how I single-handedly saved the Olympus Mons colony from a dust storm of doom, she finished with a flourish. Mason chuckled. Impressive, though I'm not sure how that skill set translates to our current situation. Pelia leaned in, her scales glinting in the firelight. Oh, I've got plenty of skills that could come in handy here, Mason. Want a private demonstration? Before he could respond, Asiya interjected. Mason, I found some interesting fruit earlier. Would you like to try it? She held out a plump, purple object. Ah, thanks, Mason said, accepting the fruit. As he bit into it, juice dribbled down his chin. Asiya giggled, reaching out to wipe it away with her thumb. Allow me, she purred. Eve cleared her throat loudly. If you're done playing with your food, Mason, I could use your help with something. I've been working on a way to purify larger quantities of water, but I need an engineer's perspective. Mason nodded, grateful for the distraction. Of course, lead the way. As they walked off, Astrid's voice drifted after them. The threads of fate tangle and twist. Choose wisely, Mason. Days turned to weeks and weeks to months. The colony grew and thrived under Mason's leadership. They expanded their camp, building more permanent structures. Gardens were planted, stocked with seeds salvaged from the ship and native plants Eve deemed safe. Pelia trained a security force, while Asiya organized a council to handle disputes and resource allocation. Through it all, Mason found himself drawn deeper into the complex web of relationships forming around him. Asiya's unwavering support and affection were a balm to his stressed mind. Pelia's fierce loyalty and passion ignited a fire in his blood. Eve's brilliant insights and quiet strength grounded him. And Astrid, she remained an enigma, but one he found himself increasingly desperate to solve. One night, unable to sleep, Mason wandered to the edge of the camp. He found Astrid there, gazing up at the three moons. Trouble sleeping? She asked without turning. Mason sighed. Just a lot on my mind. The responsibility, the constant challenges, He trailed off, unsure how to articulate the tangle of emotions surrounding his relationships with the women. Astrid turned to him, her form shimmering like starlight. The heart is vast enough to hold many loves, Mason, But be warned, where there is great love, there is also the potential for great pain. Mason ran a hand through his hair. That's what I'm afraid of. I don't want to hurt anyone. Astrid's laugh was like silver bells. Oh, Mason, it's far too late for that. Before he could ask what she meant, a scream shattered the night. They raced back to the camp to find Eve doubled over in pain, clutching her stomach. "The baby!" she gasped. "It's coming!" Mason's eyes widened in shock. He knew Eve was pregnant. They'd discovered it a few months ago, but it was far too early. "We need to get her to the medical tent," he ordered, scooping Eve into his arms. As he carried her, he saw Asiya and Pelia emerge from their shelters, concern and something else, jealousy, flashing across their faces. The next few hours were a blur of activity. Mason held Eve's hand as she screamed and pushed, following the instructions of a colonist with midwifery experience. Finally, with one last gut-wrenching cry, Eve gave birth to twins. As Mason held the tiny, squalling infants, a wave of emotion crashed over him. These were his children. He was a father. The news spread quickly through the camp. While most celebrated the new additions, Mason couldn't help but notice the strained looks on Asiya and Pelia's faces. The delicate balance he'd been maintaining was shifting, and he wasn't sure how to stabilize it. In the weeks that followed, Mason threw himself into caring for Eve and the twins. He was determined to be there for them, even as he tried to maintain his duties as leader of the colony. But the strain was beginning to show. One afternoon, as Mason was chopping wood for the communal kitchen, Pelia approached him. Her usual confident swagger was subdued. "We need to talk," she said bluntly. Mason set down his axe, wiping sweat from his brow. "About what?" Pelia gestured vaguely. "This situation. You, me, Asiya, Eve, the kids. It's not sustainable, Mason." He sighed heavily. "I know. I'm trying to figure it out. No," Pelia cut him off. "You don't get to figure it out alone. We're all in this together, remember? It's time we had an honest conversation, all of us." Mason nodded slowly. "You're right. Tonight, after the council meeting, we'll talk." As the sun set that evening, Mason gathered Asiya, Pelia, Eve, and Astrid in his private shelter. The air was thick with tension as they settled around the room. "So," Mason began awkwardly, "I think we all know why we're here." Asiya spoke up first, her voice soft but determined. "We love you, Mason. All of us in our own ways, and I believe you care for each of us as well." Pelia snorted. "That's putting it mildly. The question is, what are we going to do about it?" Eve cradled one of the twins to her chest. "We can't go on like this. The uncertainty, the jealousy. It's not good for anyone, least of all the children." Mason ran a hand through his hair, a habit he'd developed when stressed. "I know. I never meant for things to get so complicated. I care about all of you, deeply. But I don't know how to make this work without someone getting hurt." Astrid, who had been silent until now, stepped forward. Her form seemed more solid than usual, as if she were exerting great effort to maintain it. "Perhaps the solution is not to choose, but to embrace." The others looked at her in confusion. Mason furrowed his brow. "What do you mean?" Astrid smiled enigmatically. "In my culture, love is not a finite resource to be hoarded and divided. It is a force that grows stronger when shared. What if, instead of fighting over Mason, we create a family together?" Silence fell over the room as they contemplated her words. Mason's mind raced with the implications. Could it work? A family unit with all of them? Pelia was the first to speak. "You mean, like, all of us? Together?" Her voice held a mix of skepticism and intrigue. Asiya nodded slowly, her eyes brightening. It would solve many of our problems. And, I must admit, I've grown fond of all of you. Eve hugged her baby closer. It would give the children a stable family unit, multiple parents to love and protect them. Mason looked around at these extraordinary women, Asiya with her unwavering kindness, Pelia with her fierce passion, Eve with her brilliant mind, and Astrid with her otherworldly wisdom. He felt a swell of emotion in his chest. "I think," he said carefully, "that it's worth a try, if you're all willing." One by one they nodded their agreement. As they began to discuss the practicalities of their new arrangement, Mason felt a weight lift from his shoulders. It wouldn't be easy, but nothing worthwhile ever was. As the meeting wound down, Astrid pulled Mason aside. "Remember," she whispered, "love is a powerful force, but it can also be dangerous. Tread carefully." Mason nodded, a shiver running down his spine at her words. But as he looked at his newfound family, he felt a surge of determination. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. Little did he know, the greatest test of their love and unity was yet to come. That night, Mason sat alone in his shelter, the weight of the day's decision settling on him. He stared at the flickering light of the small fire, the flames dancing shadows across the walls. The air was thick with anticipation, a charged energy that seemed to vibrate through the camp. A soft rustling at the entrance made him look up. One by one, Asiya, Pelia, Eve, and Astrid entered the shelter, their expressions a mixture of resolve and vulnerability. They had all come to him, seeking to solidify the bond they had agreed upon. Asiya was the first to approach, her blue skin glowing softly in the firelight. She knelt beside him, her eyes filled with tenderness. "Mason," she whispered, her voice a soothing melody, "we are here to strengthen our connection, to become one in heart and spirit." Mason reached out, taking her hand. "I know, Asiya, and I'm grateful for each of you." Pelia stepped forward next, her usual fierce demeanor softened. She placed a hand on Mason's shoulder, her green scales shimmering. "We've chosen this path together," she said, her voice steady. "Tonight, we begin anew." Eve, cradling one of the twins, smiled gently. "We need to embrace this new family, for the sake of our children and for ourselves." Astrid, her form more solid than ever, moved closer. "There is a magic in this night, Mason. Let it guide us." Mason nodded, his heart swelling with love and gratitude. He rose to his feet, pulling Asiya up with him. "Then let's do this together." The air seemed to hum with an otherworldly energy as they began to shed the barriers between them. Asiya's hands were gentle, her touch sending shivers down Mason's spine. Pelia's strength was a comforting presence, grounding him in the moment. Eve's quiet grace brought a sense of peace, while Astrid's enigmatic aura added an element of mystique. As they came together, the firelight casting their intertwined shadows on the walls, Mason felt a deep connection forming. It was as if their souls were intertwining, each touch, each kiss, weaving a tapestry of unity and love. Asiya's lips met his in a kiss that was both tender and passionate. Her hands traced the contours of his body, exploring with a reverence that made his heart ache with longing. Pelia's kisses were fierce, igniting a fire within him that matched the intensity of her spirit. Eve's touch was soft and reassuring, a balm to his soul. And Astrid, with her otherworldly presence, brought a sense of wonder and magic to their union. The night was filled with whispered words of love and devotion, their voices mingling with the sounds of the alien forest outside. The air around them seemed to shimmer, as if the very essence of the planet was blessing their union. Mason moved between them, his love for each woman expressed in different ways. With Asiya, it was a dance of tenderness and passion, their bodies moving in perfect harmony. Pelia's fierce love was a powerful force, their union a testament to their mutual strength and respect. Eve's gentle touch brought a sense of calm and serenity, their connection deep and abiding. And Astrid, with her ethereal presence, brought a sense of the divine, their union transcending the physical realm. As the night wore on, they lay entwined, their bodies and souls bound together in a web of love and unity. The firelight flickered, casting a warm glow over their resting forms. Asiya was the first to speak, her voice a soft murmur. "We are stronger together, Mason. This bond we share will see us through the challenges ahead." Pelia nodded, her hand resting on his chest. "We'll face whatever comes, as one." Eve smiled, her fingers lightly tracing patterns on his skin. "Our love is our strength." Astrid, her form shimmering in the dim light, whispered, "And the magic of this night will protect us." Mason held them close, his heart full. "I love each of you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Together, we can overcome anything." As they drifted off to sleep, the forest around them seemed to whisper in approval. The bond they had formed this night was more than just physical. It was a merging of hearts and souls, a promise to face whatever the future held together. The years that followed their unconventional union were not without challenges. Mason and his four partners had to navigate the complex dynamics of their relationship while also leading a growing colony on an alien world. But as time passed, they found a rhythm, a balance that worked for them. 5 years after the birth of Eve's twins, Asiya announced her own pregnancy. Mason remembered the mix of joy and trepidation he felt as he held her hand, her blue skin glowing with an inner light. "I hope it has your eyes," he said, smiling. Asiya laughed, a sound like tinkling bells. "As long as it doesn't have your stubborn streak, my love." Pelia, ever the pragmatist, was already planning. "We'll need to expand the nursery and increase our food production. Maybe it's time we tried domesticating some of those rabbit lemur things." Eve nodded enthusiastically. "I've been working on selective breeding techniques. This could be the perfect opportunity to implement them." Astrid simply smiled her enigmatic smile. "The threads of fate grow ever more complex, but they are strong." As the colony grew, so did Mason's family. Pelia gave birth to a strong-willed daughter 2 years after Asiya's son was born. Even Astrid, despite her ethereal nature, managed to conceive, though the pregnancy and birth were unlike anything they had experienced before. 10 years into their new life, the colony had evolved from a cluster of makeshift shelters to a thriving village. Mason stood on a hill overlooking their home, marveling at how far they had come. Solar panels glinted in the dual sunlight, powering their growing technology. Gardens bursting with a mix of earth crops and native plants surrounded the central buildings. In the distance, he could see a herd of the domesticated rabbit lemurs they now relied on for meat and fur. "Admiring your handiwork?" Pelia's voice came from behind him. She wrapped her arms around his waist, resting her chin on his shoulder. Mason leaned back into her embrace. "Our handiwork," he corrected. "I couldn't have done any of this without you. All of you." Pelia snorted, but he could hear the smile in her voice. "Sweet talker. Come on, the council's waiting. Apparently, there's some dispute about water allocation for the new hydroponics system." As they walked back to the village, Mason reflected on how their unconventional family unit had shaped the colony's governance. The five of them formed the core of the council, each bringing their unique strengths to the table. Eve's scientific insights drove their technological advancements. Astrid's otherworldly perspective often provided solutions no one else would have considered. And Mason? He was the glue that held it all together, the mediator, the problem solver, the one who could see the big picture while also attending to the smallest details. The years continued to pass, marked by triumphs and setbacks. They lost colonists to unknown diseases, forcing Eve to work tirelessly on developing new medicines. Pelia's security forces fought off attacks from increasingly aggressive native predators. Asia's diplomatic skills were put to the test as the growing population led to more internal conflicts. Through it all, Mason and his family remained the steady center of the colony. Their children grew, each showing a unique blend of their parents' traits. Eve's twins, now teenagers, were already making breakthroughs in xenobiology. Asia's son had her gift for mediation, often resolving disputes among the colony's youth. Pelia's daughter was a natural leader, organizing the younger generation with military precision. And Astrid's child, well, no one was quite sure what to make of them, but their insights often proved invaluable. 20 years after the crash, Mason celebrated his 50th birthday. His hair was streaked with gray, laugh lines crinkling the corners of his eyes, but he felt more alive than ever. The celebration was interrupted by an urgent message from one of their long-range scouts. "Unidentified object entering the atmosphere," the woman reported, her eyes wide with excitement and fear. It's a ship, but not one of ours." The news sent shockwaves through the colony. They had long speculated about whether they'd ever be found, whether Earth even knew they were missing. Now, it seemed, they had their answer. As the unknown ship descended, Mason gathered his family and the council. "Whatever happens," he said, looking each of them in the eye, "we face it together. This is our home now, our world." They watched from the colony's central square as the ship landed in a nearby clearing. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a hiss of hydraulics, a hatch opened. A figure emerged, clad in a sleek environmental suit. It approached slowly, hands raised in a universal gesture of peace. When it reached the edge of the square, the figure removed its helmet. A collective gasp went up from the colonists. The woman who stood before them was clearly human, but her features were subtly different from their own. 30 years of divergent evolution had left its mark. "Greetings," she said, her accent strange to their ears. "I am Commander Chen of the Earth Alliance ship Horizon. We've been searching for you for a very long time." Mason stepped forward, acutely aware of the eyes of his people, his family on him. "Welcome to New Eden, Commander Chen. I'm Mason, the colony's leader. We have quite a story to tell you." The days that followed were a whirlwind of activity. The Horizon's crew was amazed by what the colonists had accomplished, marveling at their adaptations and technological innovations. Mason and his family found themselves recounting their history over and over, each telling bringing a mix of nostalgia and pride. But as the initial excitement wore off, tensions began to rise. Some colonists, particularly the younger generation who had never known Earth, were wary of the newcomers. Others saw the Horizon as a ticket back to the life they'd left behind. Mason found himself mediating more disputes than ever, struggling to balance the colony's needs with the undeniable opportunities the Horizon presented. One night, exhausted from another long day of negotiations, he retreated to the quiet of his family's private garden. He found Astrid there, her form shimmering in the moonlight. "The threads are shifting," she said without preamble. "A decision approaches." Mason sighed, sinking onto a bench. I know. We can't ignore the wider universe forever, but this is our home. I don't want to lose what we've built here. Astrid's laugh was like wind through leaves. Oh, Mason, always trying to hold on to everything. Sometimes, to gain, we must be willing to let go. Before he could ask what she meant, the others arrived. Asiya, Pelia, and Eve, each bearing the marks of the years they'd shared. They settled around him, a familiar comfort. "The Horizon's captain wants an answer," Pelia said bluntly. "Are we going to open diplomatic relations with Earth or not?" Asiya placed a calming hand on Pelia's arm. "It's not that simple, my love. Our people are divided. Some want to leave, others are afraid of change." Eve nodded. "The scientific opportunities are incredible, but I worry about how contact with Earth might affect our ecosystem, our way of life." Mason looked at each of them in turn, these women who had shared his life for 3 decades. "What do you think we should do?" Their discussion lasted long into the night, weighing pros and cons, considering every angle. As the first sun began to rise, they reached a decision. The next day, Mason stood before the assembled colony, his family beside him, the Horizon's crew watching curiously. "People of New Eden," he began, his voice carrying across the square. 30 years ago, we came here by accident. We were lost, afraid, unprepared for the challenges this world would throw at us. But we survived. More than that, we thrived. We built something beautiful here, something unique." He paused, looking out at the faces of the people he'd led for so long. "Now, we have a choice. We can isolate ourselves, protect what we've built from outside influence, or we can embrace this opportunity, share our discoveries with Earth, and in turn, learn from them." A murmur ran through the crowd. Mason held up his hand for silence. "After much deliberation, the Council has decided. We will open diplomatic relations with Earth, but," he raised his voice over the growing noise, "New Eden will remain autonomous. We are not a colony of Earth, but an independent world willing to engage in peaceful exchange." The reaction was mixed, but as Mason outlined their plan controlled cultural exchange, limited trade, collaborative scientific research, he saw more and more heads nodding in agreement. As the meeting dispersed, Commander Chen approached Mason and his family. "That was quite a speech," she said, a note of admiration in her voice. "I look forward to working with you, all of you, your world here. It's unlike anything we've seen before." Mason smiled, wrapping an arm around Asiya's waist as Pelia and Eve flanked them. Astrid's shimmer edged into view, completing their circle. "We look forward to sharing it with you, Commander. Now, how about a tour? I think you'll find our rabbit lemur farms particularly interesting." As they walked off, Mason couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. They had faced countless challenges over the years, but always as a unit, a family. Now, as they prepared to face this new chapter, he knew that whatever came, they would handle it together. The sun set on New Eden, painting the sky in brilliant hues of purple and gold. Mason stood with his family, Asiya, Pelia, Eve, and Astrid, their children and grandchildren gathered around them. They watched as the Horizon took off, carrying the first diplomatic messages back to Earth. "So," Pelia said, a hint of her old mischief in her voice, "ready for another adventure, old man?" Mason laughed, the sound echoed by his wives and children. His hair might be gray now, his face lined with age, but his spirit felt as young as the day they'd crashed on this world. "With you 4 by my side," he said, looking at each of his wives in turn. "Always." As night fell and the 3 moons rose, casting their ethereal light over New Eden, Mason reflected on the twisted path that had led him here. A missed inspection, a faulty door, a crashed ship. So many small moments that had added up to a life grander and more fulfilling than he could have ever imagined. He squeezed Asia's hand, felt Pelia's strong arm around his waist, saw Eve's brilliant smile, and sensed Astrid's comforting presence. Surrounded by the family he had built, the world they had created together, Mason knew one thing with absolute certainty. He was home,